The alarm went off at exactly 5 in the morning, a sharp digital sound that sliced through the cold silence of my bedroom. Outside, the Alaskan dawn was still blue and heavy, the kind of half-light that makes the snow glow like ash. I remember blinking at the window, watching my own breath fog against the glass, when my phone began to vibrate across the nightstand. "Mrs. Fraser, I'm so sorry to wake you," said a nervous voice. It was Mr. Lang, the building manager. "But your daughter-in-law is here with a group of men. She says she's the new owner, and she's here to take the furniture." For a second, I didn't move. The heater hummed faintly, and somewhere beyond the window, a snowplow scraped the street. Then, slowly, I sat up, my heart surprisingly steady. I didn't feel fear. I didn't even feel anger. What I felt was something else entirely, something colder, sharper. "Don't stop her, Mr. Lang," I said softly, my voice calm. "Let her in." He hesitated. "Are you sure, ma'am?" I said let her in. Just make sure she signs the visitor log. Full name and ID. I hung up before he could answer and reached for the phone on my nightstand again. I opened the small blue app icon tucked between my messages and weather forecast, the security camera app I had installed 3 weeks earlier. My thumb pressed the live feed. The screen filled instantly with the view from the lobby. There she was. Lydia Fraser, my daughter-in-law of just 5 months. Wrapped in a fur-lined coat, hair slicked into a tight ponytail, the picture of confidence and control. But beneath that polished mask, her eyes darted nervously, her jaw set in determination. Around her stood 3 movers tall, men in heavy winter jackets, one holding a clipboard, another carrying folded cardboard boxes, the third glancing toward the front desk uncertainly. Lydia's lips moved fast as she talked to Mr. Lang. The lobby camera didn't capture sound, but I could read her words as clearly as if she had shouted them. "It's my right. I'm the owner now." I felt the corner of my mouth twitch. Switching to the camera in the hallway of the 10th floor, my floor, I saw the corridor empty, silent. My apartment door was still intact, closed, untouched. I returned to the lobby feed. Lydia had already handed over her ID and was ushering the men toward the elevator. As the doors slid shut, I took a deep breath and leaned back against the headboard. My pulse was fast, but it wasn't fear that made it beat like that. It was anticipation, the quiet kind that comes when you know, finally, everything is about to change. 10 floors up, the elevator would open to my world, my paintings, my husband's old compass collection, the mahogany table I'd kept polished for years. But she wasn't going to find what she thought. Because this time, I was ready. I whispered into the stillness of the room, "Go ahead, Lydia. Take what you came for." Outside, the first sunlight broke over the frozen bay, pale and cold, as the elevator climbed. And that's how it all began. 4 months earlier, my life had been peaceful, predictable, even beautiful in its quiet rhythm. I'd retired from my position as a marine researcher at the Alaska Oceanic Institute 2 years before, and had grown accustomed to the stillness, the hiss of the coffee maker at dawn, the slow movement of seals on the harbor ice, the distant hum of fishing boats heading out. My only son, Ethan, lived 30 minutes away in Anchorage, working as a mechanical engineer for a shipping company. He called every Sunday, sometimes to chat, sometimes just to say he was fine. That was enough for me. Then, one Thursday afternoon, while I was trimming my indoor plants and listening to the faint creak of the wind against the windows, my phone rang. "Mom," Ethan said, his voice full of energy I hadn't heard in years. "I met someone. Her name's Lydia, and I think she's the one." I smiled, though a small ache bloomed quietly in my chest. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Tell me about her." "She's smart, kind, works in marketing, just moved here from Seattle. You'll love her." He was so sure, so utterly convinced. I had no reason to doubt him then. A week later, we met. He took me to a small waterfront restaurant downtown, one of those dimly lit places with rustic decor and the smell of cedarwood and grilled halibut. The kind of place you reserve for something important. When they arrived, I knew instantly which one she was. Lydia was stunning, tall, dark hair gleaming under the soft yellow light, her smile wide and practiced, like she'd perfected it in a mirror. She hugged me before I could extend my hand. "It's such an honor to finally meet you, Mrs. Fraser," she said warmly. "Ethan talks about you constantly." She spoke with that smooth tone of someone who knows exactly what to say and when to say it. Throughout dinner, she complimented my earrings, my hair, even the way I folded my napkin. It was pleasant at first, but every compliment came wrapped in something sharper. "You must feel so lonely up here sometimes," she said between bites of halibut. "All that ocean and snow, no one to share it with. It must be hard." I forced a polite smile. "I manage fine. I've always loved solitude." "Oh, of course," she said quickly, waving her hand. "I just meant it's brave of you. Some people your age couldn't handle that." Your age. Two simple words that landed like ice in my stomach. At the end of the meal, she insisted on preparing tea. "It's a blend I brought from Seattle," she said. "Soothing, good for circulation." The tea smelled faintly sweet, with a strange bitter undertone I couldn't place. I drank half the cup out of courtesy. By the time we left, the restaurant lights shimmered in my eyes, and I had to grip Ethan's arm to steady myself. "You okay, Mom?" he asked, concerned. "Just a little dizzy," I murmured. That night, my friend Martha Kane, who had joined us for dessert, called me. "Helen," she said firmly, "don't drink anything that woman gives you again." There was something off about that tea, and about her. I laughed it off then, thinking Martha was overreacting. But later, lying awake with my head still throbbing faintly, I remembered Lydia's eyes across the table, how they didn't quite match her smile. I told myself it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was the beginning of everything. In the weeks that followed, Lydia became a constant presence in my life. It started innocently, phone calls to check in, text messages with heart emojis, and polite questions like, "Did you sleep well, Mrs. Fraser?" Or, "Do you need anything from town?" At first, I thought she was just trying to be kind, maybe nervous about fitting into the family. But kindness, I would learn, can sometimes be the most effective disguise for control. She began stopping by unannounced. Sometimes she'd bring homemade soup or small grocery bags. "Ethan told me you've been forgetting to eat properly," she'd say with that soft, almost apologetic smile. Other times, she'd tidy up, rearranging my things without asking my books, my framed photos, my husband's compass collection. "You shouldn't be climbing ladders at your age," she'd chide, as she moved things from higher shelves to lower ones. At first, I laughed, uncomfortable but unwilling to make a scene. Yet slowly, imperceptibly, her words began to stick. "At your age. Too tiring for you. Too much responsibility." Each phrase landed like a drop of water on stone small, unthreatening, but over time, corrosive. Ethan, too, started to change. The more time he spent with Lydia, the less he called. And when he did, his words carried hers inside them. "Mom, Lydia's just worried about you. Maybe it's time you downsized. You could move into one of those assisted living condos near Lake Hood. It'd be safer for you." Safer. That word followed me everywhere, echoing in conversations, in Lydia's voice, in my own growing doubt. I started second-guessing myself, misplacing my keys, forgetting appointments, and then wondering if maybe I really was slipping. Then one day, Ethan called to say they were getting married. Not next year, not even in 6 months, 3 months from now. Lydia had already chosen a venue, a lodge overlooking Turnagain Arm, all pine wood and glass. A small, intimate ceremony, Ethan said. Just family. I wanted to be happy for him. I tried to be. I even offered to help with the costs, giving him $6,000 I'd saved for a trip I never took. "It's my wedding gift," I told him. The wedding was beautiful on the outside. Lydia wore an ivory silk dress, her hair in soft waves, her every movement perfect, rehearsed. But behind the music and the toasts, I felt something hollow. She stayed close to me the whole evening, introducing me to guests I didn't know, always with that careful, controlling warmth. Later, in the ladies' room, while fixing my lipstick, I heard voices from the next stall. Lydia's voice low, amused, intimate. "I told you this marriage was worth it," she whispered. "Ethan's a sweetheart. His mom owns 2 properties, a beach cabin, and plenty in savings. Once she starts slipping a little more, it'll all be ours. It's just a matter of time." The other woman giggled. "And if she doesn't slip?" Lydia laughed softly. "Then I'll make sure she does." My heart slammed against my ribs. I gripped the edge of the sink until my knuckles went white. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. That night, I went home, sat alone by the window, and stared at the reflection of my face in the glass. My pulse was still trembling, but my mind was clear. She thought I was weak. She thought I'd fade quietly into confusion. She had no idea who she was dealing with. The morning after the wedding, I woke to the dull ache of exhaustion and disbelief. The sun was bright over Anchorage, bouncing off the snow-covered roofs, but I couldn't feel its warmth. Lydia's voice from the restroom still echoed in my head, those smooth, confident words that had sliced right through me. "Once she starts slipping a little more, it'll all be ours." I spent the next few days in silence, replaying every conversation, every look. Then I called my oldest friend, Martha Kane, who had been a nurse for 30 years before retiring. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, her voice was steady but sharp. "Helen, this woman is setting you up for a fall. You need proof, solid, undeniable proof. Otherwise, she'll make you look delusional." That night, I made another call to Elaine Porter, a lawyer I'd known since my days at the Oceanic Institute. Elaine was pragmatic, brilliant, and fearless. When I told her everything, she sighed heavily. "I've seen this before. They call it inheritance grooming. Slowly convincing you you're incapable, then getting legal control. You need to protect yourself legally and technologically." She told me exactly what to do. Within a week, 6 small wireless security cameras arrived at my apartment, each one no bigger than a coin, with high-definition lenses and sensitive microphones. I installed them myself, one behind the bookshelf, one above the refrigerator, one hidden in a potted plant in the living room. I even placed one inside the old smoke detector by the hallway. They streamed directly to a private cloud account Elaine had helped me set up. The second step was the locks. I hired a locksmith and asked him to keep the old lock shell, but replace the mechanism inside. The key Lydia had borrowed by accident months earlier would now open nothing at all. I left the old keyhole untouched, a perfect decoy. 2 days later, the camera sent me a motion alert while I was grocery shopping. I opened the feed right there in the produce aisle, the cold air of the freezer section stinging my face. Lydia. She was in my apartment, calm, deliberate, wearing gloves. She went through my drawers, opened my jewelry box, took photos of documents, and slipped a small gold bracelet into her coat pocket. Then she walked into my bedroom, paused at my vanity, and whispered something to herself before leaving. The camera caught every second, every sound. I stood in the middle of the store, frozen between the rows of oranges and canned soup, staring at her image on my phone screen. My breath came in short bursts. People passed by, pushing carts, oblivious to the storm breaking inside me. That night, I called Ethan. My hands trembled as I held the phone. "She was in my apartment today," I said. He hesitated. "Who?" "Lydia. I have video proof." "Mom," he said with an exasperated sigh. This paranoia has to stop. Lydia wouldn't do that. Maybe you just misplaced something. I saw her, Ethan. She took my bracelet. She took photos of my financial papers. He grew quiet for a moment. Then his voice hardened. Mom, I think you should see a doctor. Maybe you're under stress. Maybe you need help. For a long time, I said nothing. I just stared at the snow falling outside, white and soundless against the black sky. Finally, I whispered, "You'll see the truth soon, Ethan. And when you do, it'll be too late for apologies." After that night, I stopped explaining myself. I stopped seeking understanding. Elaine's advice rang in my mind. Let her think she's winning. So I waited. I let Lydia spin her web, not realizing I had already strung my own, stronger, tighter, and invisible. And one day soon, she would walk right into it. The snow had started melting along the harbor, leaving thin gray rivers of ice that shimmered under the morning sun. It was the first sign of spring in Anchorage. But inside my apartment, the air felt heavy, stale, thick with secrets. For 3 weeks, I had watched Lydia's every move through my cameras, every visit, every whisper, every fake smile. Then one evening, while reviewing the footage from the kitchen camera, I saw something that made my stomach turn cold. Lydia had come in while I was away again. This time, she wasn't looking through papers or jewelry. She went straight to the cabinet. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small glass vial, unscrewed it, and poured its contents into my sugar jar. White powder dissolving into white crystals, indistinguishable, invisible. Then she stirred it slowly with a spoon and set the jar back in place, as if nothing had happened. I stared at the screen, frozen. The video was clear, the sound crisp, the faint clinking of the spoon, the rustle of her coat. She'd been poisoning me, not metaphorically, literally. That night, I called Elaine Porter. She picked up immediately. "Elaine," I said, my voice shaking. "I just saw her put something into my sugar. I have it on video." "Don't touch it," she ordered. "Don't throw it away either. We'll send it to a lab." "And Helen," her voice softened, "this is no longer a family matter. This is criminal." The next morning, we went together to a private lab on 4th Avenue. Elaine handed them a sealed sample from my sugar container. The technician promised results in 48 hours. Those 2 days were the longest of my life. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lydia's face leaning over my kitchen counter, that calm, calculated expression. I thought about the tea, the lemonade, the constant dizziness I'd brushed off as age or fatigue. She had been softening me, little by little, trying to make me doubt my own mind. When the call finally came, Elaine was the one to answer. Her voice was grave. "It's benzodiazepine, high dosage, enough to cause confusion, fatigue, disorientation. If you'd kept using that sugar, the symptoms would have mimicked early dementia." I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling my heartbeat slam against my ribs. She wanted to make me look crazy. "Yes," Elaine said quietly. "And when she succeeded, she'd take control of everything you own." I walked to the window. The bay below was shimmering under thin light, ice breaking in long silver veins. My reflection looked different, older, maybe, but also harder. I wasn't the naive woman Lydia thought she was dealing with anymore. "She wanted to erase me," I said, my voice low. "But she's the one who's going to disappear." Elaine's reply was firm. "Then let her walk into the trap. Don't confront her yet. Let her act. Let her believe she's won. The more she does, the more evidence we'll have." That night, I poured myself a cup of coffee, black, unsweetened, and watched the camera feeds one more time before bed. Lydia's face appeared in my mind, smiling, confident, certain she had me under control. She had no idea the next move was mine. The day everything came crashing down began the same way it always did, with the sound of the ocean. The rhythmic crash of waves against the frozen docks had become my morning heartbeat. I was at my beach cabin in Homer that week, a quiet refuge where the air smelled of pine and salt, when the phone rang at exactly 5:02 a.m. "Mrs. Fraser?" It was Mr. Lang, his voice trembling. I don't know what to do. Your daughter-in-law is here again. She has a group of men with her, movers. She says she's the new owner and she's demanding access." For a brief moment, I closed my eyes and let the sea breeze brush against my cheek. Then I said evenly, "Don't stop her, Mr. Lang. Let her in. But make sure she signs the visitor log. Full name, ID." He stuttered. "Are you sure?" "Completely. Let her through." I hung up and opened the security app on my phone. The screen lit up, showing the lobby camera. And there she was, Lydia Fraser, standing in the center of the lobby like she owned the world. Her hair was pulled back tightly, her lips pressed into a sharp line. She wore designer gloves and a coat far too elegant for the hour. 3 men in moving company uniforms stood behind her, each holding tools and folded boxes. My heart thudded not from fear, but anticipation. Lydia handed over papers to Mr. Lang, who looked unsure. From the camera's angle, I saw her mouth move. "It's my property now. My mother-in-law signed it over. She's unwell." Unwell. The word made my jaw tighten. She waved at the men to follow her into the elevator. I switched the feed to the hallway camera. The numbers ticked upward. 7, 8, 9, 10. The elevator doors opened. Lydia stepped out first, the men following with heavy boots. She reached into her bag and pulled out a key. My old key. She tried it once. Nothing. Again. Nothing. I watched the frustration creep across her face. She muttered something I couldn't hear, then pulled out a thin metal card and began jimmying the lock. One of the movers shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, if you don't have the real key, we can't enter. This feels illegal." Lydia turned on him sharply. "I'll pay double. Just open it." He hesitated. The others didn't move. That was when she pulled out her phone. The camera's audio caught every word. "I'm inside the building," she whispered. "Yes, I had to force it. No, she's not here. She's at the cabin. The sugar didn't work, but it doesn't matter. We'll take what we can, and once the guardianship goes through, the rest will be easy." My breath caught. The words "sugar didn't work" sent a shiver down my spine. One of the men finally cracked the lock. The door swung open. Lydia stepped inside my home as if she were stepping onto a stage. "That couch first," she ordered. "And be careful with the glass vases, those are worth money." I sat frozen on my bed, phone clutched tightly, watching my life get torn apart in high definition. Then, faintly, I heard the sound of sirens, growing louder. Lydia paused mid-step, her head snapping toward the window. Panic flickered across her face. She turned to the men. "Leave everything, let's go!" But it was too late. The hallway camera captured the moment the elevator doors opened. 4 officers in Navy uniforms rushed out, guns drawn, shouting, "Anchorage police! Nobody move!" Lydia screamed, dropping her purse. One officer pinned her to the wall, cuffing her wrists as she shouted, "You don't understand. It's mine. She's crazy. She's senile." The officers ignored her. The movers raised their hands. Watching it unfold, I felt something deep inside me shift. Not relief, not triumph, but something quieter. Justice. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Elaine. "The police are there," she said calmly. "They've confirmed the arrest. We have her confession on tape, the lab results, the trespass footage, everything. This isn't just over, Helen. This is airtight." For a long moment, I didn't speak. I watched the officers lead Lydia out in handcuffs through the lobby, her perfect hair now disheveled, her face pale with disbelief. Finally, I whispered, "I told her she'd find a surprise." Through the window, the horizon glowed pink and gold as the first light of dawn spread over the frozen bay. The world outside looked calm again, but I knew nothing would ever be the same, because the woman she had called old and helpless had just destroyed her without even leaving her bed. The courthouse in Anchorage smelled faintly of old wood and winter coats. Outside, snow fell in slow spirals, melting as it touched the windows. I sat beside Elaine Porter, my attorney, at the front of the courtroom. My hands were folded in my lap, calm on the surface but trembling just beneath. Across the aisle sat Lydia, dressed in a beige sweater and dark slacks, her perfect posture crumbling under fluorescent lights. The cold arrogance she'd once carried like a perfume was gone. She looked smaller now, drained, her face pale and tight. Ethan was there too, sitting in the back row, his expression blank, his eyes swollen from sleepless nights. He had called me several times since the arrest. I hadn't answered. I wasn't ready, not yet. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The state of Alaska versus Lydia Frazier, the bailiff announced. Charges: trespassing, theft, forgery, and attempted poisoning. Lydia's lawyer, a young man who looked like he had never defended anything more serious than a parking ticket, stood quickly. Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty. This is a misunderstanding between family members. Mrs. Fraser suffers from confusion and paranoia. She imagined. The judge cut him off. Does the defense have any proof of these claims? Not yet, Your Honor, but... Then sit down. When the prosecution began, the evidence spoke louder than any of us could have. Video footage from my condo appeared on the courtroom monitor. Lydia's face filled the screen, her hand opening my sugar jar, her voice clear as day. The sugar didn't work, but it doesn't matter. The jurors froze. Even the court clerk stopped writing. Elaine leaned toward me and whispered, "We've got her." Next came the lab report confirming high doses of benzodiazepine in the sugar, the testimony from the movers who said Lydia offered double pay to break into the apartment, and the statement from Mr. Lang, who had watched her sign in, claiming she was the new owner. Then the prosecutor called the final witness, Dr. Peter Hanley, the forensic psychologist who had evaluated me 2 weeks earlier. His voice was steady as he spoke. Mrs. Fraser shows no signs of dementia, confusion, or memory decline. She is cognitively sound and fully capable of managing her own affairs. Lydia's lawyer tried to object, but the judge's glare silenced him. When it was her turn to speak, Lydia stood, her hands gripping the defense table. Your Honor, I loved my mother-in-law. I was only trying to help her. She's exaggerating. She's always been dramatic. Those recordings were taken out of context. The judge leaned back. You mean the recordings where you describe poisoning her sugar? Lydia's voice cracked. It was a joke. The courtroom was silent. No one believed her, not even Ethan. He sat motionless, his face buried in his hands. When the verdict came 3 hours later, it was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. The judge's voice was firm but not cruel. For attempted poisoning, theft, trespassing, and forgery, this court sentences you to 8 years in federal custody. You may appeal, but I advise you to reflect instead. Lydia's scream echoed off the walls. This isn't fair! Ethan, do something! Ethan stood, his voice breaking. You did this, Lydia. Not my mother, you. 2 officers approached and cuffed her. She twisted once, twice, then went still. As they led her away, she looked at me those same dark, venomous eyes and hissed, You ruined my life. I met her gaze without blinking. No, I said quietly. You ruined your own. When the doors closed behind her, the silence felt enormous. Ethan approached slowly, like a man walking through wreckage. Mom, he whispered. I'm sorry. I didn't see it. I didn't want to. I studied him for a long moment. You'll always be my son, Ethan, I said softly. But love doesn't excuse blindness. He nodded, tears spilling down his cheeks. That night, when I returned to my beach cabin, I stood on the porch and looked out at the dark waves breaking gently against the ice. The storm was finally over. And for the first time in months, I slept without locking my phone beside me. Spring came late that year. The ice broke slowly along the harbor, revealing the deep blue beneath. Anchorage thawed, and so did I. For the first time in months, I could breathe without that invisible weight pressing against my chest. The nightmare was over, but recovery was its own quiet battle. Lydia was sentenced to 8 years in prison. The local news picked up the story: elderly widow outsmarts daughter-in-law's poison plot. It spread faster than I expected, and strangers began sending me letters. Women from all over Alaska and even from other states wrote about their own experiences of being manipulated, silenced, or called crazy when they spoke the truth. Their words were filled with pain, but also something else: gratitude. My story had given them courage. I spent the summer at my beach cabin in Homer, surrounded by quiet. Martha visited every weekend, bringing fresh bread and that dry humor that had kept me sane. Sometimes we'd sit by the fire, not even speaking, just listening to the waves. Ethan came too, eventually. It took him 3 months after the trial to find the courage. I remember seeing his car in the driveway one foggy morning, his shoulders hunched, hands jammed in his coat pockets. He looked like the boy I used to drop off at school, the one who was always afraid of disappointing me. "Mom," he said softly, his breath turning white in the cold. "I know I don't deserve to be here, but I needed to see you." I studied him for a long time before answering. "You believed her, Ethan. You let her make me feel small, weak, insane." "I know," he whispered, "and I can't take that back, but I left her. I filed for divorce. I'm getting help, therapy. I didn't just lose a wife, I almost lost my mother." He looked at me, eyes full of regret. "Can you ever forgive me?" Forgiveness, I had learned, wasn't a single act. It was a slow unfreezing. It took time. "Maybe not yet," I said quietly, "but one day, maybe." We stood there in silence, the wind rustling through the pines, the ocean murmuring below us. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was a beginning. By autumn, I had sold my Anchorage condo. Too many ghosts lingered there. I bought a small, sunlit house near Seward, closer to the sea. I started volunteering at a local women's shelter, teaching older women how to manage finances, protect their property, and trust their instincts. It felt like healing not just mine, but something bigger. At night, I'd sit by the window with a cup of tea, the real kind, watching the lights of the fishing boats flicker across the water. One evening, as the sky turned a deep violet, I recorded a message for the women who had written to me. "If someone ever makes you doubt your sanity," I said into the camera, "it's because they fear your clarity. Don't let them take that from you. Your truth is your power. Protect it, no matter who tries to silence you." I paused, then smiled softly. Taking care of others is kindness, but taking care of yourself, that's survival. When I finished recording, I closed the laptop and stepped outside. The wind was cold but clean, brushing through my short silver hair. Above me, the northern sky shimmered faintly, with the first hint of aurora. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel old. I didn't feel weak. I felt alive. I had lost so much, but what I'd reclaimed was far greater. My peace, my dignity, my voice. And in the quiet of that Alaskan night, I finally understood. Sometimes, surviving isn't just the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new one.